have a listen to what Osazeuzi has said. Mr. Kerry, at least, does it specify at least you somewhat?
Well, he has addressed so many of the issues, but then we are still waiting for a concrete position from INEC with respect to those areas where we had those challenges. And one aspect that has not been looked into is the question of the voting process and those, the electorate. Have we looked at the issue of whether there were some violations in terms of age issue? Yeah, I noticed that one of the units, particularly Bello Manzari's unit, when they flashed this up, I saw people that look like underage voters. I don't know if it is just nature that made them like that. Otherwise, in appearance, they look like underage voters. So I don't know if the commission has gotten any report with respect to such issues. But concerning the question of the security of the process and all of that, if all that INEC does is to, deploy security, then I think is a wrong one, which means what they should do simply is to request that what we need so number of security personnel for this unit, for that unit, instead of INEC deploy and yet not being able to tell, the security what is expected of them and what, we were thinking that INEC would not only deploy those personnel, but that there would have been, an arrangement wherein they can give them their expectation and they expect that they should perform in line with that. But if it has to come from just the IG, doing all the order and what have you, without recourse to INEC itself, and all that INEC does is just deployment, I think that system is not tight enough.
I do remember the INEC chairman saying in one of those briefings that if anyone is found guilty of such, that will be dealt with, that they will not accept it. But Mr. Osazeuzi, is INEC aware of any such scenario which you spoke about? Cases of underage voting?
Well, I was in the situation for several hours till very late yesterday night. I don't recall any reports of underage voting. Certainly, no official reports is coming about that. We also monitored social media, and that I don't think has been an issue in this election. So we're not aware of such widespread underage issues of underage voting. No.
All right, right. But earlier, Samson also noted that there were those who were not accredited, but they were allowed to vote, because we looked at the electoral guidelines and the process of accreditation, what happens when the smart card reader fails to authenticate your fingerprint and the ballot where you put your number. He says, look, there were people who didn't go through any of this process and they were allowed to vote. In the event that that happens to be the case, if you do, we would like you to confirm if you have heard of it. Does that invalidate the result if it turns out that that was the case?
Well, I don't recall. Well, I only saw parts of his interview. I believe he did not say that those not accredited. Those not accredited with the card reader. Because there are two processes of accreditation. Accreditation by card reader and accreditation by the process known to the Electoral Act, which is ticking of the register. So, but we insisted in our guidelines that you must be accredited by the card reader, except you fall under the exceptions. For example, if you do not have fingers, for example, an exception is allowed for you in that regard. There are others where, when they produce their PVC, a different thing appeared in the card reader, but their names are on the register. So obviously the card belongs to them, but because of a glitch, their particulars did not pop up, but their names are also on the register, then they will be allowed to vote. I had to intervene in a case in FCT yesterday where certain young people voting for the first time had that problem, but were allowed to vote. But yes, some CSO, some observers reported to us that there are a number of people who were being allowed to vote without accreditation by the card reader. And that's what I responded to earlier, to say that we'll look at those ones and they may be prosecuted. Our officials who are guilty of doing it, especially if it's done on a widespread scale, will probably be charged to court, will probably prosecuted for dereliction of duty, because that's what the guidelines say. But as to the validation of the results, we'll take each case as it comes. If in any particular unit we saw it was widespread, that they bypass the use of a card reader, they run the risk of that unit being not accepted. And possibly, depending on the margins of error, we may have to go back and insist on the right thing being done, use of the card reader and the manual accreditation as well.
All right, I'd like you to take a look at this that just comes into our studios. It's women of Nembe Basambri area of Bayelsa State who are protesting. Here's what and why they are protesting. Okay, so Ms. Uzi, what actually transpired here is that they are protesting for that they were disenfranchised, that they were not allowed to vote. So did this pop up in your situation room? And what's going to happen to their case?
Yeah, but what's the reason given? I am seeing this video for the first time. What's the reason given? What do they mean when they say they were disenfranchised? Why?
Well, apparently, they have not been allowed to vote, and they're insisting on having their way, at least being able to cast their votes so that their own votes will also count. And they want to do it peacefully. You could hear them shouting, "We need peace."
They say that they are disenfranchised, actually, and that they were stopped from casting their votes. What then happens to these people is the reason why we want to know what will you do about this set of women who are protesting being disenfranchised in Nembe, Basambri, in Bayelsa State. What's going to happen to them?
Being disenfranchised is a conclusion. So what are the facts? What led to that conclusion that they were disenfranchised? Was it because their names were not on the register? Was it because there was violence? To answer that, I have to know the background. I have to know what it is
does that mean you haven't
that disenfranchisement.
Does that mean you haven't received
And I cannot
this,
comment if I don't know those facts.
Does that mean you haven't received any reports about this particular, locality, Nembe in Bayelsa State?
I personally know, but it's something I have to refer to my colleagues who are covering Bayelsa State or the colleagues on ground or the commissioner who is on ground.
Maybe when that specific comes in, we'll get it across to you as well. But in terms of the role of security, I know that that's a conversation that has happened several times at different levels. But yesterday, there were those, they even said that right there in Gusape that there were cases that the military stopped, restricted people from moving until they had to call INEC office. So what's the Commission's assessment of the role that the military played? Because there are those who believe that there was a militarization of the process yesterday.
I'm not so sure I understand quite clearly what the term militarization of the process means. I'm not sure I quite understand that. So I'm circumspect in trying to comment on something I don't fully understand.
So some of the specifics included when the officials restricted persons, including INEC officials, from going to perform their functions on election day yesterday in Gusape area. Then you had the scenario in Rivers. You had in Lagos, where restriction of movement also occurred by the military. Then thugs who were moving around in Lagos specifically from one point to the other, which was not supposed to be the case. So that speaks to the role that security agencies played. Is the Commission satisfied with how security performed their functions yesterday?
Well, you see, I personally would not attribute those three examples you gave as militarization of the process. But I think the conversation centered around what role they played, how professional did they act. Obviously, we liaise with them, and the scenario of Gusape is unacceptable. You cannot prevent anybody who's legitimately out there trying to discharge a duty, whether it's as an INEC official, whether it's as an observer. Once the person has been accredited, he or she is entitled to perform that duty. In fact, he or she is entitled to protection from the military, from the police, from all agencies in the discharge of that duty once they have been accredited or once they have a reason to be out. So whether they're media, they're observers, they're officials of the Commission, I think you should give them free access. So that is unacceptable. The scenario of Lagos, it's very disappointing that when they were needed the most to prevent the bad people, the deviants, the thugs, from invading polling units, they are nowhere to be found. In one of the videos where I saw a policeman, an unarmed policeman, because he was doing poll duties in the polling unit, obviously unarmed, could not take on about 7-8 people who were destroying ballot boxes and things like that. But those who are in the perimeters who are patrolling ought to have intervened. I don't know how soon they intervened, but obviously we're going to have a discussion with the security agents, with the police in that regard. In some places, they were just totally overwhelmed by in Rivers, for example, by the sheer number of violent people who came out, and there were not enough deployment there. I think in Rivers, one captain was, and his name was mentioned, would not conduct himself honorably to the authorities for the discipline of that particular officer and any other officers who did not do the job they were supposed to do in the manner they were supposed to do. But I think military law would take a course in that regard. But certainly we'll make reports to authorities, and they have command over those officers in those particular areas.
Okay, Mr. Kerry, going by all that has been said and all that you know, do you think there are cases where INEC officials could be said to be responsible for going through the process in a way that is not according to the guidelines?
Yes, the scenario painted where, card readers were not used to accredit, voters. Meanwhile, it's an instruction from the INEC that you need to do that. Who could be responsible for that? Was it that the people resisted that accreditation? Or was it that those who were supposed to administer it refused to do it? So where an official comes and says, this is what I am expected to do, that for you to vote, you must bring your PVC, then we'll do a test of it through the smart card reader, and the official refused to do that. Why should the voter be the one held accountable for that? So we need to find out what transpired in those places where there was no accreditation through the smart card readers. I doubt if the electorate will be the one giving instruction to the INEC officials that we don't need a smart card reader, we don't need accreditation through that pattern. I doubt it. So where there are such cases and the people have come out to vote, they have their PVCs, everything is ready, and somebody for one reason or the other failed to do his or her duty, why should the people be penalized? And again, this question of, okay, where you look at it from the point of view of the number of a particular area, maybe unit or ward or whatever, if it is cancelled, and when you come to results, you look at that number before you can talk about the conclusiveness and the rest of it. Now, but those that you will not give opportunity to vote, are you not, trying to oppress them?
All right, that's duly noted. I'm sure they will get to focus on that much later. But we appreciate your comment on this morning. Dan Ekere, Senior Lecturer, University of Lagos, and Oluwole Osaze, who's the Director of Voter Education for INEC. Thank you as well for coming on today.
Thank you so much.